The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, today we have the opportunity to vote to get out of the WTO. We joined the WTO in 1994 in a lame duck session, hurried up because it was fearful that the new members would not capitulate and go along with joining the WTO. The WTO was voted by the House and the Senate as an agreement, and yet it is a treaty. It involves 135 countries. It is a treaty. It's been illegally implemented, and we are obligated to follow the rules of the WTO. This is the size of the agreement that we signed and voted on in 1994. Now, if that is not an entangling alliance, I don't know what could be. It's virtually impossible to go through this and understand exactly what we have agreed to. But this is it, and this is what we're voting on today. If you vote against the resolution, you're rubber stamping this. That's what you're doing. Some argue that, yes, indeed, the WTO is not quite perfect, but we need it. We need the WTO to manage this trade. But at the same time, they have no options. You can't change the WTO. This is your only opportunity to vote and dissent on what's happening. The people of this country are being galvanized in opposition to this. They never opposed GATT. GATT did not have the same authority as WTO, but now the WTO is being found to be very offensive to a lot of people around this country. It is said that the WTO has no control of our sovereignty. That's like saying the UN has no control of our sovereignty. Yet, what body in the world directs our foreign policy? Where do we send troops around the world? Where do we put our troops under UN command? Where do we get authority to march into Kosovo and Somalia? From the United Nations. It's the same sort of thing. It's incrementalism. People say, oh, we can always oppose it. That's sort of like saying the income tax is not all that bad. It's only 1% on the rich. We don't have to worry about it, but before we know it, it's out of control. So there is incrementalism here to be concerned about. Now, to the issue of whether or not we are obligated to follow the WTO rules. Congressional Research Service on August 25th, 1999, did a study on the WTO. And their interpretation is this. As a member of the WTO, the United States does commit to act in accordance with the rules of the multilateral body. It is legally obligated to ensure national laws do not conflict with WTO rules. That's why we will be very soon changing our laws to our tax laws to go along with what the WTO tells us to do. Recently, written in an article by D. Agostino, he says on June 5th, WTO Director General Michael Moore emphasized the obedience to WTO rulings is not optional. Quote, the dispute settlement mechanism is unique in the international architecture. WTO member governments bind themselves to the outcome from panels and, if necessary, the appellate body. That's why the WTO has attracted so much attention from all sorts of groups who wish to use this mechanism to advance their interests. Indeed, this is a treaty that we're obligated to follow. It's an illegal treaty because it was never ratified by the Senate. Even if it had been, it's not legal because you can't deliver authority to an outside body. It is the U.S. Congress that has the authority to regulate foreign commerce, nobody else. We will change our tax law, and just recently, the European Union have complained to us because we do not tax sales on the internet, and they're going to the WTO to demand that we change that law, and if they win, we'll have to change our law. And the other side of the argument will be, we don't have to do it. We don't have to do it if we don't want to, but then we're not a good member, and we promise to. And what do? They punish us with trade barriers, with tariffs. It's a managed trade war is what's happening with the WTO, done under secrecy, without us having any say about it because it's out of our hands. It's a political event now. You have to have access to the U.S. trade representative for your case to be heard. This allows the big money, the big corporations to be heard, and the little guy gets set aside. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Illinois.
Mr. Speaker, my distinguished colleague, Mr. Paul, quoted from a Congressional Research Service report, and he indicated that U.S. sovereignty was imperiled through membership in WTO. Quote, as a member of the WTO, the United States does commit to act in accordance with the rules of the multilateral body. It is legally obligated to ensure national laws do not conflict with WTO rules, close quote. Not quoted, however, in this quote from Congressional Reference Service, Research Service, is the remainder of what was contained in that, which states, quote, however, the WTO cannot force members to adhere to their obligations. The United States and any other WTO member may act in its own national interest in spite of the WTO rules. The WTO even recognizes certain allowable exceptions, such as national security. And that is a direct quote from the Congressional Research Service, World Trade Organization, Background on Issues, August 25, 1999. Membership in the WTO is not a surrender of U.S. sovereignty, but its wise exercise.
The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you advise me as to how much time I have remaining?
The gentleman from Texas has 25 minutes remaining.
Thank you. I yield myself 15 seconds. It is said that the WTO does not have to, or we don't have to listen to the WTO, but they threaten us with sanctions. They do not give us incentives. It is a threat, and we capitulate. I yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from Idaho.
Is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise in strong support of h.j.res 90, which would officially withdraw the United States from the World Trade Organization and would fully restore our sovereignty, and I think that is the heart of the problem. Mr. Speaker, as the recent debacle in Seattle clearly demonstrated, the United States has absolutely no business in a bungling international organization that can unconstitutionally raise our taxes and threaten our sovereignty. The Seattle meeting was touted to be an opportunity for nations to openly and freely discuss multilateral trade agreements. In truth, this was simply a charade, and most of the meetings were closed door or secret, where certain bureaucrats and countries were allowed to negotiate while others were left at the doorstep. For instance, some of our own members of Congress, who are constitutionally responsible for the U.S. citizens they represent, were denied access to these meetings. And all this happening while protesters were being gassed and shot with rubber bullets by law enforcement. What a circus, Mr. Speaker. This is not the way that we should conduct trade. This is certainly not the way our founding fathers envisioned how we should conduct trade. When the founding fathers of our country drafted the Constitution, they placed the treaty-making authority with the President and the Senate, but the authority to regulate commerce was placed with the House and the Senate. As governmental units cannot treaty away authorities they don't have, for example, those reserved only to the states, our Constitution left us with a system that made no room for agreements regarding international trade that does not involve treaties or specific actions by Congress. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution certainly does not give the authority to international entities to tax the American people. Yet, this is exactly what the WTO has done. The WTO recently ruled that $2.2 billion of United States tax reductions for American businesses violates WTO rules and must be eliminated by October 1st of this year. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution requires that all appropriation bills originate in the House and specify that only Congress have the power to lay and collect taxes. Taxation without representation was a predominant reason for America's fight for independence during the American Revolution. Yet now we face an unconstitutional delegation of taxing authority to an unelected international body of international bureaucrats. So, Mr. Speaker, the bottom line is that we do not need the WTO to maintain free and fair trade. Trade negotiations occurred with success millennia before the existence of the WTO. So let us return to a system of negotiating trade that is constitutionally founded. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Oregon.
Yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Miller.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes. Without objection, gentleman may proceed.
I thank the gentleman very much for yielding. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, although I do not think that withdrawing from WTO is the best course of action right now, the organization must be dramatically reformed to continue to enjoy U.S. support.
The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me yield myself 30 seconds. Let me remind those who would like to reform the WTO that you're helpless. Congress can't do that. You need a unanimous vote from the WTO members, so that's not going to happen. Even the committee describes what we're talking about as a system of fair trade administered by the WTO. Fair trade, fine, we're all for fair trade, but who decides? The WTO. That's not fair to the American citizens. I now would like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Stupak.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise in support of the Paul Amendment, and some will see that as unnecessary. And they say work with the WTO and it will only get better. But what we've seen under the WTO is attacks on our environment, our health and safety standards, and we continue to have steel dumping here in the United States. I'm concerned about our American sovereignty. Our democratic form of government is threatened by trade agreements like NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, and WTO that allows claims to be made against America's markets. It allows claims to be made against our natural resources without regard to laws to protect the health, safety, welfare, and environment of our great nation, like our freshwater resources. I have raised the freshwater resources and the sale and diversion of Great Lakes water and our natural resources when we've debated NAFTA, when we debated WTO, and when we talked about trade with China. But the fact remains, once these trade agreements are passed, WTO kicks in and the U.S. sovereignty is kicked out. Take the Ethel Corporation from Richmond, Virginia, that wanted to put MMT in Canadian gasoline. It's a gas additive. Canada said, no, we want to protect our environment. We want to protect the health and safety of our people. We don't want this stuff in our gas. They went and they filed suit. What happened? Canadian government had to pay them $13 million to put the gas additive in, and now in Canadian gas you find MMT. Well, let's just take the reverse. Now we have a British Columbia company trying to put MTBE, another gas additive, here in the United States. We banned MTBE in California because of our environment. We are banning MTBE in the Commerce Committee, which I sit, because of threat to the health and safety of the American people. But they go to WTO to get them to allow them to sell it in the United States. So the British Columbia firm will now be selling MTBE in the United States. If not, they want $360 million. That's what WTO gives us. A forum. If they can't get our resources, then we have to pay them. Then after we pay them, not only do they get their gas additives, they have to put it in our gas. Who's going to stand up for our environment? Who are the people making decisions with WTO that affect your health, safety, and welfare? Who's going to be the one who's going to stand up for our water resources when the Nova Group wants to ship it? Or when the Columbia River is being attacked both on the Canadian and U.S. side because they want the freshwater resources because of droughts in this country? Who's going to stand up? Who are elected to this WTO? No one here in this Congress knows. We have no say in it. I believe that these WTOs, they are subject to attack on our environment, our sovereignty, our natural resources, and we as Americans have no say in it. So before we lose all of our control over our sovereignty, before we lose all of our control over our natural resources, before we lose all of our control over our environment, the health and safety of our people, we as elected representatives should say enough of WTO, let's get out of it while we still can.